to 1, buy and sell property, 2, have equal custody of children in divorce, and 3, vote in local school elections. I even helped design my spacious home, which features an open flow from room to room. Let's see here.
Is that house still there?
I live in it. It's my husband.
You live in it?
And Mrs. Henley's still there. I'll tell
This
you
is
more
what
about
it
that.
looks like.
Have
Yeah.
you totally explored it?
Pretty much.
I mean, are there any secret passages or anything?
You have a ghost?
If you, I'll show you. Oh, one thing I can show you. Let's see if I can get this little light to work. Yeah, I can't. I don't know if we have time today, but this has been redone, and the whole this door no longer exists, and the stairway has been put around a different way, and I'll show you that in a minute. But everything here, Bill, I just noticed. Look at she put stuff on the top of that. We should do that too.
They always did pictures and stuff really high.
And one thing to be aware of is, see the fire here in the fireplace? That's gas heat. That's gas heat. They never had coal or wood. They were very modern, and you'll learn more about their interest in all of that. Lawrence had gas heating from coal starting in 1870, and the first gas mains were made of poplar logs. And when they tore up part of Mass Street, they found the remains of some of these poplar logs. The house added electricity in 1902, although it started in Lawrence in 1888. And it has one of the only oriel bay windows in Lawrence, which you see here. We had a renovation done in the front hall and changed the direction of the stairwells around 1900. And one thing that's no longer there are the 4 porches. I know you can't see this too well, but this porch still exists. This one went into the dining room. It's been removed, and has this one, which was on the north side of the kitchen. Let me see if I can get a better view. I'll show you one other secret about the house here in a minute. And that's one of the reasons we did the renovation was for my art gallery in the back, and a sleeping porch in the above that with a lot of windows. Why would they have added a sleeping porch in 1900?
Tuberculosis.
Tuberculosis, right? So the fresh air was very important, and they did that. This is one of my favorite photos of the. Whoops. Well, you can't see it. I'm going to go back and show you one of the secrets here in a second. Which you can see from the first one picture. All right. See this right here? And if you go by our house today, you will see that window. But if you go to that room from the inside, it's been plastered over. So they removed that window, and Nancy Thillman, who had lived in this house for many years, came to visit recently, and we took her up there, and she had never that was her bedroom, and she never realized that you can see the window from the outside, but it's missing from the inside. So. So this is one of my favorite photos. They did allow a lot of vines to grow on the house. Whoops. Back here. Sorry. And that's Albert there on the front porch. We had a lovely life. Let's see. Right, it's really dark up here. It's hard for me to read. Okay. Okay. I did hire 5 live-in servants. This is just an illustration from 1884 to 1915. We had such a big house. And as you know, I never go in the cellar or the attic, so I needed a servant to help me out. They lived in a very nice room with a maple floor above the kitchen, and 3 that we know were Swedish women. One was an African American, and another was Ethel Nichols, a 19-year-old who was German American. Once Roy and Warren were out of the house, I just hired part-time staff. We had a lovely life on Louisiana Street, and this is looking north. It's an old-time postcard that our neighbor Sally Postma collected, looking north from Winthrop or 7th Street. Being raised a Quaker, spiritual life was always an important thing for me, and my values are Quaker values. As noted in a Quaker statement in the Lawrence Directory, liberty, religious, civil, and industrial equality of race, class, and sex are important Quaker values. This is a picture of the first Quaker Meeting Hall, and it was, Quakers first came to Lawrence in 1863, and in 1872, and this Quaker Meeting Hall was near what is now 10th and Delaware. 3,000 Quakers gathered from around Kansas for the annual meeting, and continued in large numbers, and it was held until the 1930s. Sadly, this Quaker Meeting House was torn down in 1941. However, Albert and I were made a decision to join in the activities of the First Presbyterian Church, which was established in Lawrence in 1878 and located at 9th and Vermont. Albert and I were on the building committee in 1899, though we were never members. I worked on plans using a cracker box as a model for the entire winter and supervised construction of the new church. So I had a lot of skills around building, and this was the design. It was built in 1899 and sadly destroyed by fire in 1928. However, some of the stained glass was retained.
What corner of Vermont and 9th is that on?
It's where a bank is now. It's across from
okay,
wheat fields.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I have other pictures that I did from my other presentation. And then there's another very similar church that was built at the same location. And then they moved to the new location in 68. Okay. These. Well, it seems like things are getting lost. I don't know, why would it do that? Slides are, you see them there, but not on the screen? Well, great mystery.
There it came up. Oh, maybe not. Yep.
Okay, well, we'll just talk about this. Another important thing that I did was to try to, oh, thank you, that helps a lot. Let me just, before I talk about this boulder, let me just say that Mrs. Henley was regarded, and I'm quoting here now, as a pillar in the Presbyterian Church, but some people who knew of her public service and benefactions may be surprised to learn that throughout her life in Lawrence, she had retained her affiliation with the Friends. I'm a civic-minded person. One of the things I noticed when we had our home on Tennessee Street, that it was an ugly jail across the street from us.
Oh, yeah.
And we decided to get rid of that. It was near the Cobb Bridge. And I was very instrumental in helping to fund and establish Robinson Park, which still exists, named in honor of Charles Robinson, our first Kansas governor. You may have seen this large Sioux Quartz boulder in the background here with the names of the original New England Immigrant Aid Society. It was dedicated at the 75th anniversary of Lawrence in 1929. It is called the Shunganooga Boulder. It was taken in the middle of the night by the Santa Fe Railroad from Shunganooga Creek east of Topeka. It weighs 225 tons. But it is troubling to me now to know that this boulder was sacred to the Kansas Indians before it was stolen. And do we have a right to take it? By 1917, I was a part of the Lawrence Civic Improvement Association, and I've always had a true concern for the poor, and that I suggested that the city use dead trees in parks and public areas as fuel for the poor. Out of this committee grew out of an important survey that was done called the Lawrence Social Survey. It was led by a KU sociology professor named Blackmore. And it looked at trade, industry, labor, public health and sanitation, housing, charity, recreation, and education. Our Lawrence recreation activities actually come out of this. And the results of the survey led to a Board of Public Welfare, enactment of an adequate housing ordinance, and supervision of city milk supply and summer playgrounds. But I'm probably best known for my 30 years on the Board of Trustees of the Lawrence Public Library and my work to establish the Children's Reading Room. I was on the first board for the Carnegie Library and which was approved by city vote in 1903. Mr. Carnegie donated $27,500 for this building, and the city had to provide $2,750 for maintenance, 10%. The library opened on December 26, 1904. It was quite a Christmas present for the community. I was the only woman on the board, and the 12 men on the board voted for a composition roof, which I knew would leak, especially on a day like today. But, quote, 12 wise men knew better about a roof than a mere woman. The roof went in. The elements softened the paper and the tar leaked down on the ceiling in spots the size of a tub. The experience wasted $400. After that, they usually took my advice, especially about the children's rooms that I funded and added downstairs in 1922. For almost 30 years of my experience on the board, I was on the building committee. I was the only woman on the building committee, made all the decisions regarding the maintenance of the building. The city staff was quite small then, just a city librarian and an assistant, so the board really had an important role. And not only that, I was very concerned about the beauty of the library. Again, we have a lovely colored postcard here. So I personally beautified the library grounds by planting cypress, birch, horse chestnut, and elm trees. And I would trim them. I'd get out there on my own and trim the trees to be sure they were all right. And fortunately, I'm sorry the colors are so bad on this. This is the bald cypress that still stands.
Mhm.
And this tree was a little more unusual. It's called a horse chestnut, and it still stands too. So if you go by the library, please thank me for planting these trees. Also, from my experience with the Lawrence Civic Improvement Association, I became very aware of the many needs of the less advantaged in our community about basic health care. At this time, there were only three small private hospitals in Lawrence, including the Simmons Hospital. This house still stands at 805 Ohio. And there also have a lovely postcard of the Simmons Hospital. But there were no public hospitals. Robert Rankin, a chairman of the Douglas County Red Cross during World War I, learned of the sad story of a local African-American man who was denied care because no private hospital would take him. There were usually only 1 or 2 beds allocated, and if they were full, they wouldn't let them in. Rankin was able to creatively use funds left over from World War I donations to the Red Cross, and with help of the Social Service League, still existing, and, quote, a band of good women with a few men, they bought and negotiated a large house at 201 Main. It was repaired and remodeled from cellar to garret. Total expenses were about $10,000, and I gave the large donation of $5,000 for the operating room and equipment. The maternity ward was in great demand from the start, and this was the very beginning of the Lawrence Memorial Hospital. Now later, the brick building funded by Mrs. Watkins would be started, but this opened in 1921 at the house. I have always supported women and their concerns. The greatest pleasure I've had in my life, and I'm quoting myself here, has been in doing things for women with stubborn husbands who would not let them have anything, easing up some despairing situations, opening a gate to a wider path, leading to a comfortable living. The memory of the skimpy years still drives me. The memory of the skimpy years still drives me. So I guess it was only natural that I also supported the women at KU. In 1922, I deeded the house I purchased at 1236 Oriad, just down the street here, where the Alumni Center is, or maybe the parking lot. And I donated it to the YWCA to become a social center for KU's female students, especially those not affiliated with a sorority, like the ones in this photo. It was the first recreational center for female students because the Kansas Union was not open and Corbin Hall was not yet either. I was saddened to learn that many non-sorority women endured living arrangements lacking proper facilities for cooking and personal hygiene. The main floor had a stock kitchen and a large supply of soft water from a cistern on the premises for laundry and washing hair. There was no water system at that point. It was all cisterns and private wells. Quote, I want the house to be a home for women and a gathering place for not only the members of the YWCA, but for all women on the Hill. I didn't want it named after me, but was convinced by the YWCA students and leaders to do so. But the 1930s, Henley House was a center of social activism, especially around racial discrimination. Henley House sent a black woman as the first delegate to the Women's Student Government Association, effectively integrating it. The YWCA also focused on integrating women's swimming classes and dances. In the fall of 1945, it became the first interracial housing on the campus. The 10 women, 6 white, and 4 black that lived there there were 6 white and 4 black that lived there, all had to get their approval of their parents to do so. They included Mary Jo Cox, who was president, the first woman president of the All-Student Council, and this was during the World War II. And also Mary McCracken, the house mother, and she's the woman in the center there. She was a Quaker, so I think that connection there continued. They were all committed to racial equality. Even though some neighbors were vehemently opposed to the housing and denied the service of the coal for heating because of their integrated status, they persevered. My son Roy confirmed that using the house for this purpose would be quite satisfactory for mother's wishes, and it was a triumph for cooperative living over campus-wide superstition and prejudice. I have always opposed prejudice of any kind. In 1915, I supported, and here's some more pictures of the women of the house. In 1915, I supported Leo Frank, a Jewish man in Atlanta, unjustly convicted of murder of the young employee Mary Fagan. I wrote this letter to the Lawrence Journal-World stating, quote, "Chicago is to have a Leo Frank Day and get 10,000 signatures requesting the pardon of Leo Frank. Will you not have Lawrence people send petitions to the governor of Georgia asking him to free the man we all think is innocent? I wish our people there to do all they can in this affair. This is a case, quote, of vengeance rather than justice." And the jury returned their verdict in an atmosphere of racial hate and social prejudice. Frank's cause was supported by the likes of Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, and Jane Addams. But tragically, he was kidnapped and lynched by known city leaders of Marietta, Georgia, on August 17, 1915. After the lynching, 3,000 Jews left the state, and it led to the revival of the KKK at nearby Stone Mountain, which is still under question today in terms of its sculpture that's there. Well, let us turn from tragedy to something lighter. I was known around town for my art collection. This is just a sample painting. My picture gallery has a large collection of paintings that Mr. H and I collected from all parts of the world during our travels. I have a story connected with each of these, and I always love to tell it when people come by. I love to entertain, including lots of gatherings on our porch. And this was one event that was mentioned in the paper in 1912. The dinner given Thursday evening by Mr. and Mrs. A. Henley for the Kansas Art Association was in itself an artistic event. The idea chosen for the dinner was Japanese, and even the invitations sent out were in Japanese design. In the serving of the dinner, the same pretty touches were used. Well, if you've seen me around Lawrence, you've probably seen me in my electric car. Mr. H and I were always trying out new machines, and we were never afraid of adventure. In 1902, we bought one of 3 open carriage steam cars in Lawrence. So you see the boiler here up above. In 1907, we drove all the way to Denver on the roughest roads imaginable. One of Albert's campaigns was for better roads in Douglas County. My husband purchased a Milborn Model 151 Roadster for me that was built by the Milborn Wagon Company of Toledo in Ohio. And this is an electric car, the first electric car in Lawrence. Although I hear you have a few more these days. The Roadster is just a 2-seater, as you can see, with a detachable roof. My husband is interested in these cars for years. He even had a Detroit light electric car. And interesting thing is that Henry Ford and Thomas Edison wanted to expand electric cars and charging stations nationwide in the 1910s. Something happened. It's called the gasoline industry. Only 983 cars were registered in all of Lawrence in 1916. And here's some more examples of these wonderful cars. And please notice, who are they advertising these cars to? Ladies of distinction. electric cars, you didn't have a crank, so it was very nice to be able to do that. And we actually bought a second car, and more of the Roadster, or the model of the 1921 was called a Brougham, a closed car with a 60 to 90 mile range. That is in the Watkins Museum today. And here's an example of how did they charge them, just like they do today. Plug it in. They had a metal bar to maneuver it, and the maximum speed was usually about 30 miles an hour. So this shows my little green Roadster. There are so many stories in my travels around Lawrence. You may have heard the story that Louisiana Street was made wider so that I could turn the car around without backing up. And if you go on the 700 block of Louisiana today, you can turn your car around without backing up, so try it out. I parked it on the north side of Weaver's when I went shopping. In 1938, I finally had donated the car to the Douglas County Historical Society, and I'd like to share this letter with you because it tells you a lot about me. This is a free dray hauling baked beans and people in church dinners, and people to church dinners, and lugging neighborhood old clothes to rummage sales, picking up old women, carrying washing home, barefoot boys after they've turned the cows into pasture, students climbing the long hill, families walking to the station with luggage, foreign boys crossing the bridge with heavy suitcases, and innumerable others through the years. Like people, the car occasionally has fits. The indicator was not working, so there was no way to tell that the power was low till it began to slow down when some distance from home. Invited to dinner one evening out on the edge of town, the car stood an hour without lights. The next morning at 10 o'clock, going out to take the car to see some work being done at the library, I found hanging in the car a white card that remarked briefly that I should appear at the police court at 8 o'clock. I took the card up to the chief's office and said to him, "Dear Chief, I came as soon as I received your invitation. My car stood on an hour last evening without lights. Whatever damage it has done to the town, I don't know of anything needing money more than Lawrence does. I'm always willing to help." The chief said, "Oh, I don't know. I'm not the one to say what should be paid, $1 perhaps." This apparently closed the incident, but 2 weeks later, this notice was given to the Journal World. The only person in police court this morning was Mrs. A. Henley, fined for speeding. The whole town laughed. An electric car could not speed. If the house was on fire, its most serious mistake was standing still. A letter from California from my son. "Mom, can you keep out of jail?" At one time, something about it suddenly welded to the current, and it could not be shut off. It just kept going. I was driving by the repair shop, asking the man to help me and ride to the corner and see if he could persuade this wild thing to stop. But his efforts failed. I thought the side of the home garage might quiet it, but it went right through the two-car garage without hesitation. In those early